everybody. Welcome to Chanel's Reality. I'm Chanel, and this is my reality. So, listen, today I just want to do a little bit of Black history. We are in the middle of Black History Month, so I want to talk some truth about Black history. So, without further ado, let's get into it.
Understanding that Black wealth and Black high society thrived during America's most racist era changes how we see everything. This is the story of the Black 400, the wealthy African American families who built fortunes, established exclusive social networks, created their own version of high society, while white America pretended they didn't exist. This is the story of families like the Marshalls, whose catering empire served the white elite while accumulating more wealth than most of their clients. The Dowses, who owned more Brooklyn real estate than many white developers. The Nails, whose funeral business made them indispensable to both Black and white New York. This is the story of how parallel societies existed in the same city, occupying the same streets, sometimes even the same buildings, but operating in completely separate social universes. And this is the story of how that Black elite has been systematically erased from popular history. How the Gilded Age narrative became exclusively white by design. And how recovering this history changes our understanding of American wealth, power, and possibility. The term Black 400 was coined in 1888 by the New York Age, the city's leading Black newspaper. In direct response to Caroline Astor's White 400, the editor, T. Thomas Fortune, wrote, "While Mrs. Astor counts her 400 in her ballroom, there are easily 400 colored families in Brooklyn and Manhattan whose wealth, refinement, and social graces would put many of her chosen to shame. The difference is that our 400 built their fortunes despite every obstacle American racism could devise, while hers merely inherited from men who were often their moral inferiors." Fortune proceeded to publish names, addresses, occupations, and estimated wealth of New York's Black elite, creating a parallel social register that documented a community that white society refused to acknowledge. The list included physicians, earning $10,000 annually, roughly $300,000 today. In an era when the average American earned $400, it included real estate investors who owned multiple properties in Brooklyn's most desirable neighborhoods. Caterers whose businesses grossed $50,000 annually. Undertakers whose funeral homes were marble palaces. It included families who sent their children to private schools, who traveled to Europe, who spoke French and German, who collected art, who hosted elaborate dinner parties, who lived lives that looked remarkably like the white elite 3 miles north, except nobody wanted to talk about them. The white press ignored them completely. When wealthy Black New Yorkers appeared in white newspapers at all, it was as servants, as problems, as criminals. Never as successful business people or cultured society leaders. And even today, when we romanticize the Gilded Age, when we watch Downton Abbey and create old money aesthetic content, when we study the Astors and Vanderbilts, the Black 400 remain invisible. This invisibility is not accidental. It serves a purpose. Because acknowledging that Black wealth and Black sophistication existed during Jim Crow complicates the narrative. It makes it harder to justify racism if you have to admit that Black people, given even the smallest opportunity, built the same kind of success that whites claimed was evidence of inherent superiority. It's easier to erase them than to explain them, but they existed, they thrived, and their story is as much a part of the Gilded Age as Caroline Astor's ballroom. Chapter 2. The Marshall EMPI Ryther Marshall family story begins in 1838, when Robert Reed Marshall arrived in New York from Virginia. He was born free in 1808, the son of a white plantation owner and an enslaved woman who had purchased her own freedom. Robert had one skill that would build a dynasty. He could cook, not home cooking, but elaborate French cuisine, the kind served at diplomatic dinners and society events. He arrived in New York with $3. By 1840, he was working as a chef for one of the city's wealthiest families, the Schermerhorns. Yes, the same family that Caroline Astor was born into. Robert Marshall spent 2 years learning not just cooking but observation. How the wealthy operated, what they valued, how they signaled status through food and entertainment. In 1842, he opened Marshall's Catering at 64 West 3rd Street. It was a small operation initially, providing meals for middle-class events. But Robert had ambitions. He understood something crucial. The New York elite were in constant competition, trying to outdo each other with increasingly elaborate entertaining, and they needed someone who could provide European-level cuisine and service. Robert positioned himself as that someone. He studied French culinary techniques obsessively. He trained his staff in formal European service. He created menus that mimicked what wealthy New Yorkers had experienced in Paris. By 1850, Marshall's Catering was the preferred provider for elite events. When the Astors hosted dinners, Marshall catered them. When the Belmonts threw balls, Marshall provided the food and service. The irony was exquisite. The white elite who wouldn't socialize with black people, even of their own class, were entirely dependent on a black-owned business for the events that defined their social status. Robert Marshall accumulated wealth rapidly. By 1855, he was worth an estimated $50,000, roughly $1.5 million today. He invested in real estate, purchasing properties in Greenwich Village in Brooklyn. He bought rental buildings that generated steady income. When Robert Marshall died in 1865, he left an estate worth over $100,000 to his sons, Albert and George. The brothers expanded the business dramatically. By 1870, Marshall's Catering employed over 200 people during the social season. They had a commissary kitchen that could produce meals for 1,000 guests. They catered the most important social events in New York. The Bradley Martin Ball of 1897, where guests wore costumes costing thousands of dollars, was catered by Marshall's. The Vanderbilt housewarming at their Fifth Avenue chateau. Marshall's, the wedding of Consuelo Vanderbilt to the Duke of Marlborough. Yes, Marshall's catered that too. Think about that for a moment. The same family that Consuelo Vanderbilt couldn't legally marry in many states, due to anti-miscegenation laws, was trusted to cater her wedding to European aristocracy. The Marshall brothers understood the contradictions perfectly. They were welcome in the kitchens of Fifth Avenue mansions, but not in the parlors. They could prepare food for the 400 but couldn't be among them. So they created their own version. Albert Marshall's home at 151 Duffield Street in Brooklyn was a 3-story brownstone that cost $15,000. Roughly $450,000 today, comparable to upper-middle-class homes in white neighborhoods. The interior featured imported furniture, oil paintings, a library with over 1,000 volumes. Albert spoke French fluently. His children were educated. At private schools, the Marshalls hosted their own elaborate dinner parties, not for white clients, but for Black Brooklyn's elite physicians, lawyers, successful business people, clergy, educators. These gatherings were just as formal, just as elaborate as anything happening on Fifth Avenue, multi-course French meals, string quartets, guests in evening dress. The difference was that nobody in white society knew or cared that they were happening. George Marshall married Elizabeth Gloucester, daughter of the prominent black clergyman John Gloucester, connecting the Marshall fortune to another established black family. The marriage in 1871 was covered extensively in the black press. The New York Globe described it as the social event of the season, uniting two of our community's most distinguished families. The white press didn't mention it at all. By 1890, the Marshall family businesses were grossing over $100,000 annually, roughly $3 million today. They owned real estate worth an estimated $200,000. The combined Marshall family wealth was probably around $300,000, roughly $9 million today. This wasn't Vanderbilt money, but it was significant wealth. It was more than most white families had. It was old money by any reasonable standard. The business was in its 3rd generation. Yet if you read histories of Gilded Age New York, if you study that era's society and culture, you will never encounter the Marshall name. They've been completely erased.
Build a website you love with Wix. For your words, create your brand, your opportunity, your breakthrough.
And they're not unique. Chapter 3. The Brooklyn Elite. Brooklyn in the late 19th century was home to the largest concentration of wealthy black families in America, particularly the neighborhoods of Bedford-Stuyvesant, Fort Greene, and Crown Heights. These weren't poor neighborhoods. They were mixed-income areas where successful black families owned substantial homes alongside white middle-class families. The real estate holdings of black Brooklynites were significant and well-documented. The 1890 census recorded over 2,000 black-owned properties in Brooklyn, with values ranging from $2,000 to $40,000. The Downs family owned 12 properties in Bedford-Stuyvesant. David Downs started as a porter, saved obsessively, purchased his first property in 1868. He bought buildings that white owners were abandoning as neighborhoods began to integrate, purchasing properties worth $5,000 for $2,000, holding them as neighborhoods stabilized, then selling at profit or converting to rental income. By 1895, David Downs' real estate portfolio was worth an estimated $60,000, roughly $1.8 million today. His daughter, Susan Downs, became one of the first black women to attend Hunter College. His son David Jr. became a physician. The Downs family home at 214 Willoughby Avenue was a showpiece for stories, with a library, music room, and entertaining spaces that could accommodate 50 guests. They hosted the Brooklyn Literary Society, a group of educated Black professionals who met monthly to discuss literature, politics, and social issues. Members included Dr. Philip A. White, whose home we mentioned earlier. He was worth an estimated $35,000, roughly $1 million today. His medical practice treated both Black and white patients. Dr. Sarah Garnett, the first Black female principal in New York City's public school system, she owned her home in Brooklyn outright, worth $12,000. Maricha Redmond Lyons, writer and educator. Her family owned real estate and operated a successful pharmacy. These weren't isolated success stories. They were a community, an entire social class that had built wealth despite systematic exclusion from most economic opportunities. The National Negro Business League conducted a survey in 1900 that documented over 400 Black-owned businesses in Brooklyn alone. These included restaurants, tailors, grocers, coal dealers, contractors, physicians' practices, legal offices, real estate agencies. The combined annual revenue of Brooklyn's Black businesses exceeded $2 million, roughly $60 million today. This was a substantial economy, operating largely invisibly to white New York. The social institutions of Black Brooklyn were elaborate and exclusive. The Carlton Avenue branch of the YMCA, opened in 1892, was funded entirely by Black donors. The building cost $20,000. It featured a gymnasium, swimming pool, library, and meeting rooms. Membership was selective. You needed references from existing members. You needed to demonstrate financial stability and moral character. It was deliberately exclusive, not based on skin color obviously, but based on class, education, and social standing. The exact same criteria Caroline Astor used for her 400. The Brooklyn Howard Colored Orphan Asylum, founded in 1866, was governed by a board of wealthy Black Brooklynites. Board members were expected to donate at least $500 annually, roughly $15,000 today, ensuring that only the wealthy could participate in governance. The asylum's annual fundraising ball was the social event of the Black Brooklyn season, held at the Brooklyn Academy of Music, attended by 500 guests in formal attire. Tickets cost $5, roughly $150 today. Deliberately pricing out working-class families, this wasn't cruelty. It was the same exclusivity that white society practiced, the creation of social barriers that separated the wealthy from everyone else. The Black elite of Brooklyn were creating their own version of hierarchical society, complete with all the snobbery and exclusion that characterized white society. The difference was that their exclusivity was invisible to the white world. That
Introducing Scara and its adaptive shaving innovation.
What you looking at, babe?
Cars on cars.com.
What's wrong with this one?
I just got promoted, so I'm looking for something more. Ciao.
Ciao.
2 million cars for 2 million possibilities. Cars.com. Where to next?
Chapter 5. The Parallel Ion Frast URY. What's most remarkable about the Black elite of the Gilded Age is not just that they accumulated wealth, but that they built complete parallel institutions because they were excluded from white societies. Institutions they had to create their own, and what they created was sophisticated, extensive, and completely invisible to most white Americans. The Black social clubs were as exclusive as anything on Fifth Avenue. The Ugly Club, founded in Brooklyn in 1885, was supposedly about charitable fundraising, but it was really about social networking. Among successful Black men, membership required nomination by 2 existing members, approval by the board, and annual dues of $25, roughly $750 today. Meetings were held monthly at members' homes, rotating between the most impressive residences. The ugly theme was ironic humor. Members would compete to be voted ugliest, with the winner making the largest charitable donation. But the real function was creating space for Black businessmen to make deals, form partnerships, discuss politics. It was the Black equivalent of the Union Club or the Metropolitan Club, where white elites networked. The Eureka Club in Manhattan, founded in 1890, was even more exclusive. Only professional men were eligible: physicians, lawyers, successful businessmen, clergy with advanced degrees. The initiation fee was $50. Monthly dues were $5. The club maintained rooms at 235 West 53rd Street, with a library, reading room, billiard room. Members included Dr. Philip A. White, John E. Nail, T. Thomas Fortune, Charles W. Anderson, who would become the first Black supervisor of revenue for New York. These men were building political and economic power through social networking, exactly like their white counterparts. The social season for Black New York was as structured and elaborate as the white season. The Brooklyn Howard Ball in January, the Ugly Club Ball in February, the Eureka Club reception in March, the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity, founded in 1906 at Cornell, held its New York chapter's annual dance in May. The New York Age published society pages covering these events, describing who attended, what they wore, who was notable. Exactly like white society pages, one description from 1895 reads, Mrs. Albert Marshall received guests in a gown of ivory silk with Belgian lace. Her diamonds were magnificent. The Downs family arrived fashionably late. Miss Susan Downs was stunning in emerald velvet. Dr. White and his wife were accompanied by the distinguished Mr. T. Thomas Fortune. These descriptions mirror white society coverage exactly: the same obsession with fashion, the same name-dropping, the same performance of refined consumption. The Black elite even had their own version of Newport, Highland Beach, Maryland, founded in 1893 by Charles Remond Douglas, son of Frederick Douglass. It was created specifically as a summer retreat for wealthy Black families after Douglass was refused service at a whites-only resort. Families built summer homes, modest compared to Newport's cottages, but substantial, typically costing $5,000 to $10,000. The Highland Beach community was deliberately exclusive. Property could only be sold to people approved by the Homeowners Association. Approval required letters of reference, financial documentation, essentially proof that you were part of the Black elite. By 1900, Highland Beach had 40 properties owned by Black families from New York, Philadelphia, Washington, Baltimore. They would summer there hosting beach parties, sailing, playing tennis, doing everything the white elite did at Newport, completely separate, completely invisible to white America. The educational infrastructure was equally parallel because most white private schools wouldn't accept Black students. Wealthy Black families created alternatives. The Institute for Colored Youth in Philadelphia, the M Street School in Washington, these were academically rigorous institutions that prepared students for college. Tuition at these schools was substantial, $50 to $100 per year, roughly $1,500 to $3,000 today. Only wealthy families could afford it, which was the point. These schools created networks among the Black elite. Students at M Street included the children of the most prominent Black families. They socialized together, formed friendships that would last for life, eventually married each other. It was social reproduction, the same process of maintaining class boundaries across generations that the white elite practiced. The result was that by 1900, you could be born into the Black elite, educated in elite Black institutions, socialize exclusively with other elite Black families, marry within that circle, and pass on wealth and status to your children, an entire parallel society, functioning according to the same rules as white society, just invisible to it. Chapter 6. The ERACORE, the systematic erasure of the Black 400 from American historical memory, is not an accident. It's a purposeful act that serves specific ideological functions. If we acknowledge that Black wealth and Black sophistication existed during the Gilded Age, we have to confront uncomfortable questions. If Black people could build substantial fortunes despite slavery's recent end, despite Jim Crow, despite systematic exclusion from most economic opportunities, what does that suggest about claims that Black poverty is cultural or inherent? If Black families could maintain wealth across generations, could create exclusive social networks, could build parallel institutions, why didn't these advantages compound the way white generational wealth did? The answer to that question leads directly to examinations of systematic wealth destruction, of events like the Tulsa Massacre, where prosperous Black communities were literally burned to the ground, of redlining and urban renewal that deliberately destroyed Black neighborhoods. It's easier to erase the Black elite from history than to explain what happened to them. The erasure began almost immediately. White newspapers of the Gilded Age rarely covered Black society, except as curiosity or mockery. When Black social events were mentioned, it was in condescending terms: amusing Negro ball. Colored society attempts elegance. The subtext was always that Black attempts at sophistication were imitation, performance, not genuine culture. This framing allowed white society to dismiss Black elite culture as trying too hard, as not authentic. Meanwhile, white elite culture, which was equally performed and often even more rigid, was treated as natural, inherent, simply the way refined people behaved. After the Gilded Age ended, when historians began studying the era, they focused exclusively on white elites. Books about Gilded Age society discuss the Astors, the Vanderbilts, the social competition among white families. The Black 400 is never mentioned, not even as a footnote. Thorstein Veblen's The Theory of the Leisure Class, published in 1899, analyzes conspicuous consumption and social competition among the wealthy. It draws all its examples from white society, despite the fact that black elites were engaging in exactly the same behaviors. Later, historians followed Veblen's model, discussing Gilded Age excess, displaying wealth.
Get double factory rebates during Truck Month at Ryan Ford in Sealy. Get double factory rebate values on new 2026 Ford Expeditions, Broncos, and more. Double factory rebate values at Ryan Ford in Sealy, Texas, USA.
This season, you've got places to go, people to see, and things to do. You may have already gotten vaccinated for flu and COVID-19.
Social climbing, but always with exclusively white examples. The result is that multiple generations have learned about the Gilded Age without ever knowing the black elite existed. Even academic historians, who specialize in African American history, often overlook this community. The focus is typically on slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow violence. The struggle for civil rights, black wealth, seems anomalous, difficult to fit into narratives of oppression and resistance, so it gets minimized or ignored. There are exceptions. Scholars like Willard Gatewood, whose book Aristocrats of Color documents the black elite. Kevin Gaines's Uplifting the Race examines black middle-class culture. But these are academic works with limited readership. They haven't penetrated popular consciousness. The old money aesthetic that's popular on social media now. The romanticization of Gilded Age wealth and refinement. It's exclusively white. The images are of white families in mansions, white debutantes in ball gowns, white men in gentlemen's clubs. Nobody is creating content about the Marshall family's catering empire, about the Nail family's real estate holdings, about the Ugly Club or Highland Beach. This is partly ignorance. Many content creators simply don't know this history exists, but it's also aesthetics. The old money look that people are drawn to is coded white. Acknowledging that black families had the same wealth, wore the same clothes, lived in comparable homes, complicates the aesthetic. It forces recognition that refinement and sophistication aren't racially specific. That wealth looks the same regardless of who has it. And that recognition undermines the whole fantasy of old money as somehow more legitimate, more authentic than new wealth. Because if the black elite could build the same lifestyle in one generation that white families claimed took centuries to develop, it reveals that old money mystique is just performance, that anyone with resources can buy the appearance of refinement. The Marshall family serves as the perfect example of this erasure. They catered the most important social events of the Gilded Age. They were present at the Vanderbilt balls, the Astor dinners, the society weddings, but they're absent from every history of these events. Books about the Vanderbilt wedding mention the flowers, the dress, the guests, the cost. They never mention who provided the food, who coordinated the service, who made the event function. The Marshalls are erased from the very events they made possible, and this erasure is everywhere. Once you start looking for it, Dr. Susan Smith McKinney Stewart was the first black female physician in New York, third in the nation. She had a successful practice in Brooklyn, owned her home, was married to a successful preacher, was active in black society. She's absent from most histories of women in medicine. Absent from discussions of Gilded Age Brooklyn. James Weldon Johnson, who would become famous during the Harlem Renaissance, grew up in this world. His autobiography describes the black elite of late 19th century New York. The social clubs, the exclusive events, the wealthy families. But when we teach Johnson, we focus on his later work, on his civil rights activism, not on his descriptions of black wealth and society. The evidence is extensive. The primary sources exist. Black newspapers, published society pages, census records documented property ownership, city directories listed businesses, but it's been systematically overlooked, minimized, erased from popular narratives, and that erasure serves a purpose. It maintains the fiction that wealth and refinement are white attributes. It preserves the mystique of old money as something different from mere money. It avoids uncomfortable questions about what happened to black generational wealth. The invisible dynasty remains invisible because too many people benefit from that invisibility. Chapter 7, The Legacy and the LOSS. The black elite of the Gilded Age didn't disappear. They transformed into the foundation of the Harlem Renaissance and later the civil rights movement's leadership class. But something was lost in that transformation, and understanding what was lost is crucial. The Black 400 of the 1890s was focused on wealth accumulation, social status, cultural refinement. They were not primarily focused on racial uplift or civil rights activism. They were focused on maintaining and improving their own position. This made them controversial within black communities. W.E.B. Du Bois criticized them as the talented tenth who were too focused on imitating white society. Booker T. Washington criticized them for being disconnected from the masses of Black people struggling in poverty. Both criticisms had merit. The Black elite were creating exclusionary institutions, were sometimes more concerned with social status than racial solidarity, but they were also building something valuable. They were proving that Black people could accumulate and maintain wealth across generations. They were creating institutions, social networks, cultural traditions that provided foundation for later activism, and they were providing visible evidence that contradicted racist claims about Black inferiority. The Marshall family catering business continued into the 1930s, eventually closing during the Depression. By then, the family had dispersed. Some members had moved to other cities. Some had entered other professions. The accumulated wealth, estimated at $300,000 in 1890, had been divided among multiple heirs, depleted by economic downturns. Never reached the compounding growth that white generational wealth achieved. The Downs family properties in Brooklyn were gradually sold off. Some were lost to tax foreclosure during the Depression. Some were sold to pay debts. Some were divided among so many heirs that individual shares became worthless. By 1950, descendants of David Downs owned nothing. The real estate empire that had been worth $60,000 in 1895 had completely dissipated. This pattern repeated across the Black elite. Generational wealth that should have compounded the way Astor or Vanderbilt wealth compounded instead disappeared within 2 or 3 generations. Part of this was systematic. Redlining prevented Black families from moving to appreciating neighborhoods. Urban renewal destroyed Black business districts. Discrimination limited economic opportunities, but part was also structural. Wealthy, white families could put assets in trusts that lasted for generations, could access legal and financial sophistication that protected wealth. The Black elite, operating in a parallel system, had less access to these wealth preservation tools. And when the Great Migration brought millions of Black Southerners to northern cities, when neighborhoods like Brooklyn's Bedford-Stuyvesant transformed from mixed to predominantly Black, property values declined. White flight meant that the real estate investments of the Black elite suddenly became worth far less. The Harlem that John E. Nail had invested in during the 1890s, when it was white middle class, became predominantly Black by 1920. Nail's properties were worth less than he'd paid for them. Not because the properties had declined, but because racism devalued any neighborhood that became Black.
See, that's that bullshit. That's what they do. We just want to live in the slums. No, you want to devalue everything we own and then classify it as less than when you're the one that's doing it. Not because Black people moved in and don't know how to act and are trashy and unclean and unkept. No, it's deliberate, intentional. But anyway, let me get off my soapbox. Let's keep listening.
This is the mechanism of wealth destruction that nobody wants to discuss. The Black elite built substantial fortunes using the exact same strategies as white elites. But racism ensured that those strategies didn't produce the same results. Real estate that appreciated for white owners, depreciated for Black owners. Businesses that served Black communities could never access the capital that businesses serving white communities could. Social networks that could have produced business opportunities were limited by discrimination. The Black 400 should have become the foundation of an African American aristocracy that persisted for generations.
I need women to know that you're not limited to anything other than living your life openly and honestly.
Ask your healthcare provider if Biktarvy is right for you, and visit Biktarvy.com to view the important facts, including important warnings.
Okay, if there's one AI site builder you need to meet, it's this dope tech from Wix. Now, this whole flow is a conversation, so your words actually build your website. I'm going for a store, and after a free-flowing conversation, I get this detailed site brief. And just like that, my first draft is ready. Now, that's dope. Next, you can really get in there and style it your way. Here's the fun part. You can regenerate this whole thing over and over, or you can tweak something specific, like your layout. Let me describe what I had in mind. Yeah, that's fire. If there was ever a time to speak life into your dreams, it's right now using the Wix AI website builder.
Instead, within 50 years, most of that wealth had disappeared. Not because the families were less capable, not because they didn't understand wealth preservation, but because the system was designed to prevent Black wealth from compounding. Today, descendants of the Black 400 exist, But most don't know their own history. The Marshalls, the Downses, the Nails, they have living descendants in New York, some of whom I've communicated with during research for this. Most had no idea their great-great-grandparents had been wealthy, had owned businesses and property, had been part of an elite society. That history was lost within 2 generations, partly because the wealth disappeared and with it went the motivation to maintain family history, partly because the civil rights movement created new frameworks for Black identity that didn't emphasize wealth or elite status, and partly because American culture generally doesn't want to acknowledge that Black wealth existed and was systematically destroyed. The invisible dynasty remains invisible because making it visible would require explaining what happened to it, and that explanation implicates systems that still exist, that still function to prevent Black wealth accumulation. It's not ancient history, it's ongoing. The Black elite of the Gilded Age built something remarkable. Against extraordinary odds, they accumulated wealth, created institutions, established social networks. They proved that when given even limited opportunities, Black people could achieve the same success as whites, and then that success was systematically dismantled. Not through one dramatic event, but through thousands of small mechanisms of discrimination, through redlining and urban renewal and discriminatory lending and devaluation of Black neighborhoods. Through the steady, relentless pressure of racism operating as economic policy, the story of the Black 400 is not just about forgotten history. It's about how America destroys Black wealth while pretending Black poverty is natural. It's about how success stories get erased when they contradict comfortable narratives. It's about how parallel societies can exist in the same city, how people can accumulate wealth and sophistication and still be invisible. And it's about how that invisibility serves power, how forgetting this history makes current inequality seem inevitable rather than constructed. The invisible dynasty deserves to be visible, not because it makes us feel good about historical Black achievement, but because understanding what they built and what happened to it changes how we see everything. If this hidden history shocked you as much as it should have, subscribe.
Yeah, go on over to what's the name of their site? I love watching Black history stuff, learning. Old Money Thorn. Go ahead and subscribe. I don't watch them a lot, but I thought that this commentary was on point and important for our people to know. Now I have zero watching, but hopefully somebody will watch it later. You know what I mean? And if so, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and share the video. Drop a comment below. Did you learn anything? Were you intrigued by anything? Did it change your mind about how you think Black history happened in this country? And is it all about slavery and oppression and all of those things? Which those things are enormous part of Black history. But it would be great if we could talk about Black wealth and what our ancestors built, but then was systematically taken away from us, systematically taken down, systematically interrupted and, stopped and corrupted intentionally and deliberately so that we could end up where we are today. Not all of us, but you know what I'm getting at. Disenfranchised to some degree. But anyway, like I said, hit the like button. Thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Chanel's Reality. I'm Chanel. This is my reality. Y'all have a good one. Bye-bye.